Hey folks, welcome to Guitar Daily, episode 335. So I thought, well, why don't I talk about the 335 type guitar? Now, I've had a bit of a history with 335 guitars. There's been a few of them I've used over the years. It's probably the greatest guitar design ever, I think, or one of. You know what I mean? It just works for so many things. So I thought, let's dive into that today. My start with this sort of style of guitar was a very thin by Hofner, and I bought it for cheap. It had been broken, and the pickups were really weak, and I loved that guitar. It was fully hollow though, so it used to feed back something chronic, and I used it in this sort of blues swing band, and it was really great for it. Sold it to a student of mine, and then had a couple of different guitars, and then I ended up with this one, which is an Ibanez JSM100, which is my favorite of the 335 type guitars for a bunch of reasons. Now, I don't particularly like the Gibson ones. I'm just going to go and put that out there. Now, I know some people will be like, don't you dare say that. But, I don't. The Gibson ones, I've played a bunch of them, and to be honest, 9 out of 10 of them are rubbish. Not particularly well made, not sustaining properly, not just, Whereas this guitar has a bunch of appointments I really like, so this was one. I bought this guitar. It was not a sponsored guitar. It was before I did the Ibanez endorsement, which I no longer do, but so I paid for it, and I bought this because I didn't have a 335 type guitar in my arsenal, and there's some reasons I chose this one. Now, what makes a 335 so great? Well, if you played a hollow body guitar, full hollow body, one thing you'll notice is that feedback can be a real problem. A guitar like this, you don't have that issue because it's got a big block that runs down the center, all right? This one's had a couple of modifications. I've had 2 of those removed. That switch has been moved. But other than that, it's all stock, right? And the thing is, like, with a Les Paul, there's a certain sound that happens with that. But with this type guitar, because of this hollow stuff, it does actually make a difference, right? One of my favorite things about a 335 is that you can play it acoustically. Believe it or not, being an electric guitarist, primarily, electric guitarist, I play without an amp most of the time. Plenty loud for practicing just by yourself, right? Whereas a Les Paul, you're not going to hear it quite so well. A Telecaster, you're not going to hear it so well, or whatever. So that's one thing I like about them, is they have a bit of acoustic resonance for practice, right? But that affects the sound too. I've heard people talk about 335s as sounding woody, right? They don't have as much sustain as a Les Paul, but it's still pretty good. But you have great access up here, because of the cutaways and everything. And one of the reasons I like this guitar over a Gibson is, for one, it has this half brass, half bone nut. Hopefully you can see that in there. And that, for me, takes away a bit of the mud that can happen with these sort of guitars, right? I love these Goto 510 tuners. They are, if you haven't used Goto 510s before, they're the smoothest, best tuners I've ever seen, period. It's got this beautiful binding on this guitar. Ebony fretboard, which I really like. The ebony is just so smooth. It just sounds beautiful, and it adds, again, a bit of brightness. And that's one thing with this guitar that sounds different than a Gibson. It just doesn't get muddy in the neck position. I mean, I'm on neck pickup there. If I go to bridge pickup, still has that sweet bridge pickup sound as well. But yeah, the half bone, half brass nut, the Goto 510 tuners, the ebony fretboard with big frets, weird compound radius, 7 1/4 to 9 1/2, I think it is, or something like that. So more kind of fendery feeling down here, and then doesn't choke out because of the compound radius. So such a nice feeling neck, fairly substantial. So it just works in a lot of ways. You don't get the feedback that you get with a deeper hollow body. One thing I do find with a 335 is I do find they're pretty big over your arm here, but you do get used to it. One thing is they do balance really well. Like an SG that would have 2 cutaways like this, they do that pretty bad, right? This guitar, there's so much weight back here, it doesn't. It's super balanced. And because of the depth between that point and that point, it actually sits kind of a little higher than a Les Paul would. And I actually find it more comfortable than a Les Paul for that reason. Like a Les Paul sits there, this sits there. And one thing with this sort of guitar that's so great is that you can play any style of music on it. If I see someone turn up with a 335, I don't go, oh, what sort of music are they going to play? If they turn up with a Telecaster, kind of the same thing, although, you know, many people would see a Telecaster and go, oh, country. But a 335 could be... a sweet jazz tone. Great jazz guitar. You could put it on the middle pickup. They do a funk guitar thing really well, which is why Sco uses this when he does it, right? You can rock out with them. So they can do like a bunch of different things. The one thing it doesn't really do is a country sound, although... it's okay. But it's not really great at that. And that's the thing with it. It'll do a funk sound, but is it the best funk sound? Well, maybe, maybe not. Is it the best jazz sound? Maybe, maybe not. But it can do everything, and that's one of the reasons these guitars are so popular, the 335 type guitar. You know, and like I said, it doesn't have to be a Gibson. Gibson make great guitars. The thing with Gibson that I found, and I forgot to mention it earlier, I have played some killer 335s by Gibson, but they were vintage ones, right? The older ones. And who can afford to take one of those, right? I'd be worried about it getting broken. You know, would I really want to check it in the hold of a plane, a vintage Gibson 335? Hell no. This guitar, well, I've checked it in plenty of times on planes. I have to do that. But one thing too I forgot to mention is this has this big volute here, and that kind of makes that bit a bit stronger, whereas Gibson's, you know, it's much thinner at that point. This can still get broken, but less likely to. I don't know if you can see that very well, but yeah, so whereas like a vintage Gibson, I'm just not going to take it on a plane. I'm not going to travel with it. I'm not going to risk it at all, right? And of the new ones I've played, most of them have been rubbish. They just have, sorry. You know, that doesn't mean there aren't good ones out there. They totally are, but most of them, majority I've played, haven't been great. They've just been okay. And they're a lot more expensive. So that's why I chose this guitar, and I bought it, like I said. And it's been a workhorse. I've used this on so many gigs. I used this with Layla Hathaway when she was here. I've used it on a bunch of TV shows. I used it when we did Dancing with the Stars. I used it, it's been on a stack of recordings. Records really well. Yeah, so I thought episode 335, let's talk about the 335 guitar, or 335, or 335, however you want to say that. But yeah, it's a special guitar for a bunch of reasons. So if you found this useful, please like and subscribe. Buy me a coffee's link below. All that stuff helps. But the most important thing is thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.